Hello and welcome back. I'm Steve Clemons, editor-at-large of The Hill. Thanks for joining us for the second session of our timely and important discussion on ESG and corporate responsibility in America. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Walmart and the Environmental Defense Fund, for their support of today's event. Whether companies have long had ESG strategies in place or they're currently transitioning from the ground up, what is the measuring stick used to determine movement in the right direction? What does a successful ESG strategy really look like? In this session, we're going to attempt to answer these questions and more. Before we get underway, a reminder, you can tweet us at The Hill Events, and you can use the hashtag TheHillESG. We're broadcasting live, and we'll take your questions throughout the program. As with any live stream, you could experience occasional trouble with the video. Refreshing the page, I hope, fixes your problem. My first guest of the hour is Senator Sherrod Brown, who I spoke with a short while ago. Senator Brown of Ohio is the chairman of the Senate Banking Committee, and earlier this year held the Banking Committee's first ever hearing on climate risks and the financial system. Senator Brown, it's great to be with you again. As chairman of the Senate Banking Committee, you have been playing a key role looking at, how to make ESG investments, ESG reporting real rather than token. When you think about it, what are the steps and measures you think is important to make part of, this new framework of ESG?
Well, I first think of a story I was told by the chair of the president of the Richmond Fed. The Fed is, as you know, divided into 12 regions, and there's a president of each of the 12 regions. Cleveland is one of them, Chicago, New York, whatever. And president of Richmond Fed said, watch me and let me know you're watching me. So a big part of this is oversight. I mean, companies need to do much better at disclosure, voluntary disclosure, and if necessary, well, certainly government required disclosure through the SEC and other ways, but a broader, deeper disclosure than we've done in the past, especially on climate, on diversity, on structural racism, on all the things that many in America have learned so much more about, Steve, as you know, as you've written about.
Right.
In terms of what happened in the pandemic. We know so much more about wealth inequality. We know so much more about climate. We know so much more. So part of it's much better disclosure, and then it's oversight, and it's things like we for the first hearing ever, this committee is referred to colloquially as the Senate Banking Committee. It's been way too much about Wall Street. The full committee name is Senate Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs, and that means a lot more focus on housing. It also means a lot better oversight. We did a hearing on structural racism in housing for the first time, from the Black Codes to Jim Crow to redlining to Trump administration locking in discriminatory housing. We did a hearing on climate, that the financial institutions have to begin to price the risk of climate way better than they do, and part of that's legislative, part of that's oversight as they comply.
One of the things that I really like that you've been laying out on this front as well is you've been pointing to this giant wealth gap that's been baked into the U.S. economy for a long time, and it's getting worse and worse. And you've kind of set a bar, in my view, that said, as we proceed down this road, as we look at metrics, we have to make sure that we are unwinding those drivers of that wealth gap and begin to see things come back together in the nation. Do you have any confidence that that is beginning to happen?
I do in this way. I think when Joe Biden first began to run for president this last time, I think he thought of his presidency, 2 years ago, as let's restore the country to pre-Trump normalcy. I think the pandemic and the reaction of the public to the pandemic and the great revealing of the pandemic during the pandemic of wealth inequality and climate and structural racism, that Joe Biden has shifted into realizing he's got to go big. That's what the whole administration's done. I mean, I'm not here to speak for the administration anyway, but that's what the whole administration's done. And I think they are going to be serious about this. And that means looking at all of these things. And I was just earlier this week, I did a roundtable with home care workers, union and non-union alike. And these are people that make $10 and $12 an hour, taking care of the people whom we most love, our dying parents or grandparents, our sick friends or cousins or uncles, and we pay them so little. Well, part of the infrastructure plan is to build a foundation in terms of human resources too, and human assets, and that's beginning to pay people better. It's minimum wage. It's putting money into the child care system. It's paying teachers better. It's taking care that way, and that builds a foundation that I think takes us where we as a nation should be going.
Senator, do you think that, there's a debate going on right now about infrastructure and about the tax code and, who pays for this infrastructure that's coming down the pipe? And as the government makes these investments in partnership to make one of the biggest infrastructure investments in generations, you've got a lot of power to set new patterns for the country. And some have said that the deal that they have cut doesn't necessarily build in climate to the degree that it should, doesn't build in the wealth gap, the asset gap in the country to the degree that you have talked about. Do you think that is fixable before these bills come down the pike?
Yeah, it's the bipartisan bill it's consequential, but it's very inadequate. It fundamentally it defines infrastructure in the very much traditional public work sort of way. Water, sewer, highways, bridges, does a little on broadband, maybe a little on climate, maybe a little on education, but it doesn't do fundamental investments. So this is a two-step process. It may be two steps at the same time, the bipartisan effort and the more partisan, only because Republicans don't want to go along, even though the country does, on a massive infrastructure. And again, that's defined as is not just water, sewers, bridges, highways, but broadband and education and housing, to be sure. Absolutely housing. 25% of people in this country who pay rent pay more than half their income in housing. One thing goes wrong, their life turns upside down. That's not something our country should abide. So I am optimistic because I think Democrats understand we need to go big, and that's Democrats from Joe Manchin to Bernie Sanders. And we do that. This country begins to wipe away some of the inequality and begins to give people, regardless of where they grew up and who their parents are, more opportunity in life.
Senator, today we have speaking in this forum a lot of folks from different corners of the ESG sandbox. And, one of the things I've been probing with our guests is how real ESG is and how does the public be able to, how can they see the difference between, whitewashing something or greenwashing, those that take diversity and inclusion seriously and those who look at diversity and inclusion steps as a fig leaf. And I'm interested when it comes to metrics, what the House has passed in trying to look at compliance and metrics. I'm just interested because the details much more than the public will, but the public is going to be skeptical of some of this, I think. But I'd just be interested in your insights and what we have to get right by way of ESG metrics.
That's the hardest question. And first, I don't know that the public really knows the term particularly well yet. So I think it's important to spell it out. And too many people in this town, in Cleveland now, but too many people in Washington use acronyms, and nobody really knows what we're talking about.
Environmental, social, governance,
diversity. I know the viewers today do. But I think it's really important we talk in terms of what does this mean about climate? What does this mean about wealth inequality? What does this mean about redlining that's still, the zip code my wife and I live in, where I'm calling from right now, 44105 in Cleveland, Ohio, had more foreclosures than any zip code in the country in the first half of 2007. This is a community that's not recovered from that because of racial inequality, because of structural racism, because of the wealth gap. So we need the way to measure is constant oversight. I brought in front of my committee, first time ever, the CEOs of the 6 largest Wall Street banks. It wasn't always a pleasant conversation. It was illuminating. That will be an annual thing. And I think that the oversight we do and the metrics we put in place that you suggest, Steve, and the measurement we do from that will show progress or lack of it. And I'm optimistic it will be significant progress.
When do you think we're going to get that infrastructure bill? I don't know the timing of what's coming down, but when you look at the tax bill, the reconciliation bill, you look at the infrastructure bill, do you have timing in mind that has been, sort of shared with you from the administration?
The administration I don't make those decisions, but Senator Schumer and Speaker Pelosi and the president seem to be pointing to September. I think that's We need to move. We need to figure out how to enact this by that date. I think we will. I am pretty confident that the Democrats in the Senate, I would hope some Republicans would join. I mean, when we passed the American Rescue Plan, it was more than half of Trump working class voters supported the plan, but 0 Republicans voted for it. So it's not up to me or Mitch McConnell or any of us or even you, Steve, to say this is partisan or not. It's up to the voters to decide. And the voters clearly want something big because people see this about climate. There are climate deniers and they're living in the last century. They get a lot of attention on Fox and other places, but it's clear that the public wants us to move on structural racism. They want us to move on the wealth inequality because so many people are not given a chance in this country because of who their parents are and where they were born and what little wealth they were born into. And we can fix a lot of this. This is our moment to do this that we've not had for many, many years.
Senator, let me ask you just one last question. You and I have talked for so many years about the diminishing social contract and about how trade and technology, has in a way kind of moved a lot of workers to the edge and demeaned them over the process, and, the downside effects of those. And we really haven't taken the steps we need to make sure our workers have what they need to survive in a turbocharged economy. It's a bit ironic right now that we have a massive labor shortage. People are reconsidering what life is about. There are lots of folks maybe not going back to just jump back into the same kind of jobs. I just love your insights into this because right now at this moment, it's ironic that labor seems to have the edge. And I'm wondering if that may help enhance their position in whatever kind of social contract we end up with down the road.
No question. That question shows great insight. I mean, it's exactly right. And the fact that there are still job openings is not a function of workers not wanting to work. Overwhelming number of people in this country work every bit as hard as you and I do, Steve, and harder, and have so little to show for it. And I was talking to a woman in one of our Dignity at Work committee listening sessions, a woman in Southern West Virginia. She said the word working and poor should not be in the same sentence. And there are far too many people in this country that have worked hard, very hard, and have so little to show for it. We're seeing now wages going up. We're seeing, I think, or continue to go up for a period of time. People will return to the workplace when childcare is available, when the workplace is safer, and when wages are higher. And what's not to like about that? That's what we want for our country, that people can finally make a decent, honorable living doing home care, as my mother-in-law did for 20 years of her life, and doing jobs that have been too often paying $8 or $10 or $12 an hour.
Well, Senator Sherrod Brown, thank you so much, as always, for illuminating these issues. I think the social contract questions are among the most important. And this world of environmental, social, and governance dimensions, this scaffolding we're bringing into this is very important too. Thanks so much for talking to us today.
Good interview. Thank you, sir. Good to see you. Thanks.